Hey everybody, really excited about today's podcast. It's with Cynthia Levin, Artistic Director of the Unicorn Theater here in Kansas City. It's really special. We talk about a lot of social justice issues and the current state of theater. And she's really energetic and passionate about what she does. I think we can learn a lot from what she's been doing. Thanks so much, guys. Enjoy. Cool. We are at the Unicorn Theater in Kansas City. We're pretty much center stage right now.
We are center stage. We're a little upstage, but that's okay.
A little upstage, yes. Cynthia with the Unicorn, Artistic Director since 1980.
Well, here we go with history. I started with the Unicorn in 79.
Okay.
But I officially became the Artistic Director in 82.
So can you kind of run through the history a little bit of the theater and how it got started?
Oh my goodness. There were 3 UMKC graduates in 1974 that were looking for work. And in 1974, there was very little theater going on, professional theater in Kansas City. It was the Rep, and the Dinner Theater had just started the year before.
Oh, yes.
Tiffany's Attic, Waldo Astoria. And that was it. So, if you weren't in with one of those institutions, you weren't working. So they started this thing called Theater Workshop, and they found oh my goodness, a little hole in the wall at 3rd and Delaware down the River Market.
Yeah.
And that's how it started in December 1974. And then, of course, those of us who know the history of Kansas City know that there went the River Market 2 years later with bombings and the fights that were going on down there with people. And so they ran off in the middle of the night and moved to 45th and Main.
Okay.
Which, that hill coming up from the plaza used to be the Submarine and the Subs Pub and a couple of bars and restaurants.
Sure.
And they were in a garage underneath one of those bars, which was incredibly interesting because you'd be in the middle of a show and somebody would be in the bar using the bathroom and they'd flush the toilet, and so the pipes right over the stage, you'd hear whoosh.
You got to find a way to work that into whatever you're performing.
You had to work it into every Shakespeare and every show you were doing. Yeah. So a couple years later, in fact, when I started in 1979, we moved to the Norman School at 35th and Southwest Traffic Way, which are now condos, which is
probably not a good theater spot anymore.
Not anymore, and it wasn't really a good theater spot in 1979. But we had a little room, and in a grade school there wasn't even a gymnasium. It was a little room, sat 75 people, no air conditioning. And then in 86, we moved here to Main Street. We found the Bellman Garage.
It's a great place.
It's such a cool place. It was a little fringy 33 years ago. It was on the edge of Westport, the edge of Midtown. But it was an incredible space, and it had no columns. And every big, large space you go in, to look for a theater, you have columns holding up, the roof. And this place doesn't. It has an expansion roof, so it's a wide open space. It wasn't being used as a garage anymore. It wasn't really being used as anything. And we took the back half. We split it in two because we couldn't afford the whole thing. And I thought, it'll be cheaper and quieter if we put up a wall and take the back half and not on Main Street. So the foolish thing about that was that we didn't have a door on Main Street. So you'd have to come in off this alley through a parking lot.
Did you have a sign at the time, or how
not
did
on Main
say,
Street?
Come around back, knock 3 times? It was like a speakeasy.
You really had to want to come to the Unicorn to find the door. And it was, pre-cell phone, so it wasn't like people just call you up and go, hey, where are you?
Yeah.
So that kind of sucked. So about 22 years ago, we took over another building adjacent to us that was a coffee house, the Daily Grind Coffee House, and that was an underage coffee house. So they had bands that would come and play, and most everybody would sit out on the sidewalk and drink and smoke before they came into the...
So, because you have 2 theaters.
We do now, but we didn't then.
Okay.
We got that space, we broke through a wall, and we took over that space so we could have a door on Main Street and put a box office. It was really important. It also gave us our offices for our administrative office as opposed to being backstage, with the crew. Yeah, that also wasn't great. But you do what you can at the time, right?
Yep.
But then in 2014, the rest of the building became available. And it was like the retail store that was here just, left.
Sure.
And it's like, wait a minute, I'll take it. Without having a dime, without knowing if we should expand.
So how do you pull that off?
Well, we pulled it off. It was an incredible coup in my way of thinking, in that, first off, that what we did was we took over the building and wanted to build another stage and do this whole huge lobby. So that was going to be a couple $1 million.
Yeah.
So I started fundraising that day, the decision to sign that contract. And it took 3 years to raise a couple $1 million.
Well, yeah. I mean, how do you do that, though? Like, do you get on the phone? What do you do?
You do a lot of things. I mean, it took, I would say, 60% of my time for 3 years, and my managing director and my development director. I mean, that's pretty much most of what we did. But we had to raise that $2 million to renovate the space, and also raise the money that we needed for operating capital.
Yeah.
So it was horrendous, and it took 3 years because I never did the work until we had the money. So we never borrowed a penny.
Smart.
Right. So I'd get, 50,000 came in. Okay, let's do the drywall. Okay, now we got 10,000. Okay, let's put in a sink. So it went like that for 3 years. We opened in 2008 without owing a dime, and 4 months later, the economy tanked. Every single performing arts group that had any debt went out of business. So it was like, well, golly gee.
I mean, that kind of leads into the question. You've been here for decades now. I mean, what is the secret?
I know.
The theater.
Oh, man. Yeah. It's crazy. I mean, and then, on the heels of that, we then turned around and raised the money in 11 months and bought the building. So now
and there's not a lot of people, there's not a lot of theater companies that own the place that they perform in.
No, not locally and not nationally. No, you're usually tied to some corporate, business. So it's incredible. So I always say, and now no one can ever tell us what we can do and not do ever again, but nobody ever did. So, but nobody can. It
seems like there's
a
lot of meaning in the name unicorn. Well, how did that all come about? Because you're truly a unicorn here.
I know. It really, it's a great symbol and metaphor now, but really how it started in the 70s, we were Theater Workshop. And 80, 81, we started talking about the name because people would call and go, what are you? Are you a theater? Are you a school?
Yeah.
Do you just do workshops? I mean, it's like, oh, for God's sake. So we thought, okay, we have to name it something else. Well, for some crazy reason, from the beginning of time, unicorns were cool in the 70s, and we had a bunch of unicorns, and it became sort of our mascot. Now, of course, it's dogs, but then it was unicorns. And on the letterhead, we had a unicorn, Theater Workshop with a unicorn. And we went, wow, the easiest transition here.
It's been there all along.
Just name it Unicorn Theater. So that's what we did. And of course, in retrospect, then people thought, well, are you a children's theater? I was like, no, we're a unique, mythical beast.
Can you explain, though, the concept of what the Unicorn Theater is and kind of your place in the performing arts world?
Sure. Where it started, of course, that was decades ago. It was 45 years ago. It was a whole different landscape, again, locally and nationally in the theater scene. So the theater did everything. There really was a little bit of children's theater and a little bit of Shakespeare, but always new theater, working with living playwrights and doing world premieres. And there was always a little bit of that. Because when I came, it was sort of a little bit of everything. But it always included contemporary premieres. And, then other theaters started happening in the late 70s. And the Coterie started in 79 for children and, children's theater, or theater for youth. And when I took over, when I became the artistic director, it was like, my love and my expertise is in contemporary theater. There are now 6 other theaters, that are doing, and there's Shakespeare, and the rep was doing Shakespeare, and there's other things going on. We're going to only do contemporary theater. And so that's when I sort of shifted the mission away from classics, away from everything else except contemporary theater, world premieres, and theaters that make a statement.
Sure.
That was always, I was, involved in protest. I'm from DC, and that's what the 70s were about, protest and that things could change.
Yep.
That you could change the world. And so I definitely grew up believing that you could take on social issues and political issues, and that people, if you believed in something and it was good and real and honest and fair and just, you could change the world.
Can you talk a little bit about what contemporary theater is? And obviously it's new plays, but the process that gets involved that you have to go through to select what comes here.
Yeah, it's kind of tricky, and contemporary is a funny word. Some people, contemporary starts in 1950. Some people, it starts yesterday. So it's kind of a hard definition, and certainly we make our own definition.
Sure.
But my definition to that is really that's something that's relevant, and it's relevant right now to what we are living through or going through or needing to learn something or learn more about something. So most of what I try to choose are things that are new within a 5-year period.
Okay.
And that's really hard because that means most of the time they're not published. You don't,
Sure.
you don't get a catalog.
So how does that work then? How do you find them?
Man, you gotta kind of keep your ear to the ground. You just have to know what's going on across the country, know what people are working on and developing. You gotta read a lot. And I read a lot. And I also have a literary manager, and the literary manager has 10 readers, and so we read a lot. But it was interesting.
So do those readers then pass up, hey, we think this might be a finalist,
Yes.
and then you take a look at it?
Yes, they go through, every manuscript that's given to us goes through at least 2 readers, and then if it really gets a high score, then it ends up with our literary manager and then to me. But you really have to constantly, that's the biggest chunk of my job, is just knowing what's being written, what's being talked about, what's being developed. But 20 years ago, we were actually chosen one of 10 theaters to come to Chicago and talk about starting an organization. George White, who used to run the O'Neill Festival, which is really the highly praised new theater development place on the East Coast, and David Goldman, who is just a theater fanatic in New York, got together and they looked around and they said, most new plays are not happening in New York. They're not happening in the regional theaters, the larger theaters, like the Rep.
Yep.
They're happening in what they termed the second tier organization. The smaller theaters is where all the cool stuff's happening. So they found 10 theaters throughout the country, all geographically spaced in different locations. Brought us together in Chicago 20 years ago and said, hey, we want to start an organization and we want you to be, the original 10 and start this board of directors and work on developing and sharing your resources to work on new plays. And this was phenomenal because that's what we'd always done. And I was working with local playwrights or national playwrights. It's hard to find playwrights. 30 years ago, you didn't have an internet that everybody was on. So this organization started, the National New Play Network, and it is one of the largest non-theater organizations in the country. It's not based in a theater. It's not a developing organization. It is a playwright to share resources on developing and production of new work.
So the big plays that are on Broadway, do they start in this network typically?
Sometimes. And I would say that most of the plays and most of the theaters are more like the Unicorn, so they're not, huge commercial sort of entities. We're not going to necessarily find something that has 30 people, and actually we're not developing musicals yet, although that is part of the future, that we also want to get into developing new musicals. That's a whole different ballgame. But it's not a commercial entity. We all want to do plays that have a significance, a social significance,
Sure.
that are about an issue, that are about something that you can learn about or learn from, that do not necessarily depict most of what's on television from a white, middle-aged, middle-class background.
Yep.
So this is what we look for. So it's not necessarily as Broadway-oriented as I would say maybe off-Broadway or off-Broadway. And developed and we don't necessarily really care about that so much. A few of them have gone on to off-Broadway, but mostly it's for the now 127 theaters that are members of the National New Play Network to work on new plays and help playwrights develop their work. We give each play 3 world premieres instead of just 1, so that by the time, and it's really cool.
Does that mean so in 2 other cities that they would do this
2
as
other
well?
theaters, 2 other cities. We call it a rolling world premiere. It's the coolest concept, and it's really, really working. So usually a playwright gets, a world premiere, and if it isn't ready to go to the rest of the world, it sits on a shelf. So this way, there are at least 3, sometimes 4 or 5 theaters that get together, decide they want to do this particular play with this playwright within a 12-month period of time. And each theater does their own production with their own cast, their own director, and that playwright goes from production to production. You have to work together with the playwrights, space out your rehearsals and space out your openings. And
do you typically work then with the same 3 theaters?
No.
Okay, so it just depends on whatever you're showing.
It's a different theater every time, pretty much, out of the 127.
Yeah.
But it is amazing because the playwright then gets to see their work. It's so easy to say, well, it was because it was in Kansas City. Well, it was because the actors weren't very good. Well, it's because the director was, if the director's this good, then it'll always be good. Whatever, you can use a rationalization, an excuse. This way, you get to see your play done in 3 different cities with 3 different casts and 3 different directors and 3 different concepts, so that. And that playwright rewrite, and goes from
then
each
do you
production.
just pass on your feedback to the next artistic director of wherever city they're going?
Absolutely.
And you communicate? Because I'm sure there's a lot of nuances with each different performance.
Right. And how are you, doing the set? Are you doing it in the round? Are you doing it on a proscenium stage? It is the resources that we get to share are second to none. I mean, this has just never happened. And a lot of theaters, most theaters, don't work together. I mean, they collaborate a great deal within the walls of their own theater with their artists and their designers, but not usually with a group of other theater artists throughout the country.
Sure.
On what did you do? And, did you use a piano for that? Or how did you do that scene change? It's amazing. And you get to learn. I mean,
are those other theaters a similar size then?
We're all different sizes.
Sure.
I would say the Unicorn sits right about in the middle, of
How many
theaters.
people come to a performance typically?
Well, we have 2 theaters. Okay, this one we're in is a little bit smaller. It seats about 100 to 120.
Sure.
And it's our black box where we do get to change it up every time. Depending on the show, it may work in the round or in a proscenium, or in this way, it's 3/4 in the round.
Can you talk about the benefits of being an audience member in such a small environment? I mean, it's really intimate.
It's really intimate, and our other theater seats 150, and it's just as intimate.
Absolutely.
I think, when you think of choice and what kind of, theater you want to be attached to and involved with, this is why I realized Unicorn had to be my home, because this is exactly the kind of theater that I want to do. I want to talk to people. I don't want to have some thing that is like film on a screen, and you're sitting 100 feet away and there's something happening up there, and you can something, they're thinking something, but it's a different experience. I want the experience where everyone can see the actor's eyes, and you can see them sweat, and you can see if they're telling the truth or they're lying. I mean, you are part of that. The audience here is very much part of the experience because we can see each other.
How would you describe your audience? I mean, is it all walks of life, all types of people? Is there a certain demographic that you're going after when you're marketing these performances?
Not really targeting an
Okay.
audience unless there's a very specific piece of it that's about a segment of our population that we want to let them know, hey, you're never going to see a play. I think of last year when we did Viet Gone about they're all Vietnamese,
Sure.
family on stage, written by an Asian playwright. Well, you're never going to see something like that. So if you want to see a live production, come see Viet Gone. And so we do things that usually are very diverse in race and culture and gender. So therefore, that will also be included in our marketing for a particular show. But I think
Do you see a certain type, though,
There's-
person come in?
there's always a certain type, maybe. I mean, we're going to generalize a lot here.
Sure.
But you think of performing arts and theater, and a lot of time it's class.
Yes.
Because, how many people can afford to go spend 30, 40, 50 and above bucks on something every week or every other night or, or once a month even.
Yeah.
So that has sort of narrowed what people think about the performing arts, that it's going to be mostly white and mostly middle to upper class, liberal. I mean, you can get a whole bunch of stereotypes in
Yeah.
that. The thing that we've done to try to change it up, and older, and so that has been talked about for years and years, the death of theater, because your audience is aging. And so, and maybe an audience who are 70 to 80 years old don't want to see the same things somebody
Sure.
who's 30 wants to see. So I just always keep my eye on what's interesting for, 30 to 40-year-olds or 20 to 30-year-olds.
Sure.
Because I think that's the future, and that's what we have to keep our eye on, because that's constantly changing every decade, and it's exciting to do. So I think it's important to change up and continually try to get in a younger audience and a more diverse audience. And one thing we do to help ensure that is that half of our performances, every single midweek performance, is a pay what you can. Now, a pay what you
Interesting.
can is exactly what that is. It's if you cannot afford a full price ticket, you can pay whatever you can afford.
Someone could pay a penny.
They can.
I mean,
We
obviously, you
actually-
hope that doesn't happen, but
The one rule, and everybody said, oh, you should have a minimum, you should have a this and that.
Yeah,
It's like,
yeah.
oh, then it's not pay what you can. The only thing I changed last year was because of a few people who were paying 50 cents, which just hurt my heart badly, is we say no change, please. So hopefully the minimum thing
be
that
a
somebody
dollar.
is going to pay is $1. But like last season, we had over 2,000 people that utilized pay what you can. That's huge. And that the average ticket price was like 12 and a half bucks. So you're talking about not $1, and people are
Sure.
afraid, oh, we can't do that. No one will ever pay full price again. That's not true. People
so then
will pay.
what is a typical retail price of a ticket?
$40, 45 bucks.
Okay. So it's still, that's still a significant discount on those nights.
Significant. And I would say a lot of people pay $20. A lot of people pay, half.
Sure.
But a lot of people can't. And
You're
they pay
exposing
$5.
people to the theater that may not ever get exposed to performing arts.
Right.
So it's
Right.
important.
I have to believe that they would not be attending the show if they couldn't pay $10 instead of $40.
No, it's refreshing to see that not everything you do has to be driven by money. You can have some things if you have some flexibility to do that. So that's pretty cool.
It puts a large sort of amount of our work, the bulk of our work, on trying to raise money a different way, because I think that is part of the problem with, and especially I think in the theater or the arts, where you're trying to say something and talk about people who are marginalized
Yes.
or not part of the majority or diverse in nature for whatever reason, or talk about immigration or people that don't have health insurance, all of those things. you can't like lock out the people that you're doing a play about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you have to allow some way for their entrance into seeing themselves on stage. And so you have to deal with price of entry and admission, and not many people, of course, are doing that because of the fear that you're going to go out of business. Well, my philosophy is always, we need people in the seats.
Yep.
You know, more than we need the dollars. If we have to figure out a way to do without the dollars, we'll figure that out. But there's no way that theater can exist without that collaboration with each other, with the designers, with the actors, and with an audience. It isn't theater if you don't have an audience.
So what is the current status of theater, I mean, in 2019?
2019 is pretty good. It's pretty strong. You know, it went through hell like we all did in '08, probably for, 5-6 years.
Sure.
Everything was a struggle. And it changed the landscape of how we sell theater. When that recession hit, when people really didn't know if they were going to have leisure time.
Sure.
Or, extra money or any of that, because you didn't know what was going to happen from month to month or week to week. So what happened was, before that time, the whole base of theater was season tickets.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't operate unless
Sure.
you sold X number of season tickets, got the money up front, and then you could do what you needed to do, and then hopefully some other people would come,
Yep.
and you'd pick up a little bit more income with individuals.
Sure.
And that was the recipe, that was the formula for how to run a theater. Well, that all changed because nobody, A, was going to give you $300 up front for something they didn't know if they were going to have a job next month, or if they were going to be able to keep their home, the following year. They weren't planning a year ahead.
Yeah.
They were planning that day, that week. So that really shifted of how to sell tickets to the theater. Not what we did.
Sure.
I'm doing the same theater and type of theater, the same type of shows, and that's always going to happen as long as I'm here. I mean, that's just what's important to me is what's going to be on the stage. But how do you get the people in? So it really went from, okay, so the most important thing, is raising money and how to do that, to now how do you advertise and sell
Yep.
tickets to your show? And so you have to just do it in a different way, and you have to do it the day of. People are
Yep.
making decisions
Yep.
at
Oh, yeah.
4 o'clock from what they're going to do at 8
What are
o'clock.
we gonna do today? Yeah.
Right. So how to sell it that way, and not to make people buy a season ticket and pick all their dates, from now till next summer. People didn't want to do that. And there are still people who do, and
Sure.
we still sell the season ticket to the people who want to keep the season ticket. And they like that. They want to fill up their calendar by September, that they know what they're doing that year.
So then, I mean, I would say it's fair to say you clearly like what you do.
I clearly do.
I mean, what is it? What drives you? What are you inspired by?
You know,
Why are you doing this?
I know. It's so interesting because I've, been running this place for 40 years, and it's like, I don't know, nobody does that anymore.
No,
get bored, or
people have,
move. Yeah.
15, 20 jobs in
Right.
their career.
Right. Crazy. And I think what I learned really early on, because I was an actor, I was a director, and I learned that to be a freelance artist is a whole different world.
Do you
And
still act at all anymore?
Not anymore.
Okay.
Not anymore. That I sort of gave up about 20 years ago. That was a little too difficult to hold on to with all of the other things that I wanted to do even more.
Sure.
But I think that that doing theater, or being an actor or a director or designer, any of it, you got to go where the work is. You got to go what's offered to you.
Yeah.
And what I found was that I didn't like a lot of the shows I was being asked to do or be in. I didn't believe in them. I didn't like what it was saying about women or African American people or gay people. It was like, this sucks. I don't want to say those words. I don't want to do this. Is offensive to me. And thought, I'm going to be in trouble. I don't love theater enough to want to just do any theater, any kind of theater.
So you sought some control by being...
Well, I got a job, at Theater Workshop at the time, and that became my theater home. And then, of course, being able to become the producing artistic director and be the one to make decisions, I could do the kind of theater that I thought was meaningful.
Sure.
And my whole life has been about social issues and activism, and so I wanted
hasn't
to
theater,
do that.
I mean, the history of theater is rooted in that.
Yeah.
I mean, and
Yeah,
it's
it
usually,
flourishes in the countries that are under the most oppression,
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean,
like the United States right now.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so those issues, I mean, it seems to parody whatever the current state of society's in.
Right.
So, I mean, is that how you view your contribution as maybe a citizen in the United States? Is, hey, I need to make people aware that oppression is happening,
Right.
and people are being
Injustice,
marginalized.
yes. That is everything. I mean, it's my hobby, it's my vocation, it's my volunteerism, it's my family. It sort of became immersive and all-encompassing. In that, and we talked earlier about how do you keep a theater alive, and it's like it's a small business. How do you keep a small business alive? And we all know it's really, really difficult.
Yep.
And it takes somebody or a group of somebodies to make sure that it stays alive. Because I can think back in the decades of times that I wanted to run. I wanted to just go somewhere else and go where it was easier and simpler, and borrow money, didn't have to borrow money to make payroll every week, which happened for a decade. I mean, there were just, bad times, difficult times.
So how do you stay happy in those times? I mean, and you could argue, it's so easy to read the news now, and, well, number one, you should be informed, but how do you not drown in all of the injustice that's happening in the world?
See, and that's the thing, we understand, I mean, current events we see every day, or we, watch MSNBC, or we read the New York Times, or, however you get the news, and it is overwhelming. I mean, it's hard, and
I think a lot of people turn away from
Right.
They just ignore it because
Right.
that's easier,
Right.
and
of course,
they don't want to be
Escape.
stressed out. Yeah.
You want to escape, and so a lot of people see their entertainment value is in escapism. It's like, I don't want to think about anything, I just want to relax and have a drink, and I want to laugh and not worry about anything.
Yeah.
See, that to me is death. That to me is not entertainment.
But that's a lot of people that go to the theater. That's one of the
criteria.
escapism. Yeah.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of theater for those people. This theater is about, I don't want to stop thinking ever. I don't want to stop not trying to find a solution or an answer for any number of problems ever. That's what excites me. And so to be able to maybe get people to think about something in a different way, or see a different kind of person than who they are, and maybe learn some empathy for somebody else. That's what we can do in the theater, because it's alive and there are actual people in front of people. And I will give you my stump speech, but a dozen years ago I did a show about 10 people who were exonerated and found to be innocent, who were on death row. And it was a true story, and so this is a subject near and dear, capital punishment, near and dear to my heart, in that I have a very strong opinion about. And I wanted to do this play, and I found four local guys that had been exonerated from the prison system here in Kansas City.
Yeah, I mean, you still see it happening all the time.
All the time. And you'd think that, we now have DNA, we now have the Midwest Innocence Project, but it's still a problem. And I brought these guys in, and they talked to us, and then I had them come after the shows. We would have talkbacks with the audience, with the cast, with these guys, and they would tell their story about being in prison. One was a lifer, one was on death row for 30 years until he was found to be innocent. And they would tell their stories alongside us, and it's like, this is real.
Yeah, that's real.
Right.
They're literally right there talking with the audience.
But those are the stories that we do, is like, this is something we have to think about. And I remember I called on some woman in the front row, and I said, you have a question? She goes, yeah, I just wanted to say, when I walked in here, I believed in the death penalty, and now I'm not so sure. And it's like, holy crap, that's why I do what I do. I mean, that you would get somebody to just think about something again. I mean, I don't know what she thinks now, and maybe it doesn't even matter.
But in that moment.
Right. That somebody found that empathy for another human being that they thought was one thing that may not have been that thing.
Do you have any, I mean, I think society as a whole needs to work on their empathy. Do you have any advice for someone that maybe wants to be more empathetic for people, but maybe they just get caught up in whatever they're doing in life, or they've been raised a certain way?
You know, there are so many reasons that you can put to that, of why is somebody generous or empathetic, and why is somebody mean, and why does somebody cut you off in traffic, and why does somebody lie to you or steal from you. I think for the most part, we can absolutely do and be anything we put our minds to it. I've seen people change. I have seen people do things that you go, well, that's who they are. No, it's not. What does that even mean, who you are? That we are capable of so much. And it just depends on, you know, where you find your comfort level. You know, if you're just out and you just are greedy and you want to do this,
sure,
that will be your motivation. But if your motivation is truly, you know, to get to know people and have friends and work with other people and be fair and just and all that, you can do that. You can do that in a constructive way. You don't have to get angry and buy a gun. I mean, you know, there are many ways to be constructive. And I think most of my young adulthood was learning how to take my energy and my activism and my passion and create something constructive out of that. And
absolutely.
I just found it. I mean, this just, you know, karma, whatever, destiny. Sure. I don't even know what to call it. I don't call it luck because I don't believe in luck. But this is what I found, and this has nourished me my entire life.
Yeah, I think, you know, just even hearing it of someone, hey, yes, you can do this. You can go out and volunteer. I mean, it could be anything, and they might just need to be told it. It may take 90-something times. Right. But, you know, that's why you have consistency. That's probably why you've been doing this for 45 years, and that's amazing.
Right. I mean, we have sort of a little saying. We have many sayings around this place, this theater. But, you know, it's like, you know, if you don't ask, you know, you don't get anything. And so, you know, that we're always just always geared to go, hey, can you help? Or, oh, can you help us here? Can you give us money? Can you want to come to the theater? You know, you just have to engage, you know. And I always think if people come to the Unicorn once, they're going to come back. It's just getting them here to try it. You know, oh, I don't like theater. You know, and people still think, oh, they got to get dressed up, and they got to wear the tie and the dress, and you can't do anything or eat or talk, or, you know, and so it has a certain feel to people that they don't want to do it. They'd rather stay home. And we fight probably most of our competition is people staying home and watching Netflix in their living room.
That's true. So
how do you get people to get out of their house, you know, to keep them active? You know, I mean, there's just a lot of things that anymore in our society, it's just sort of easy to be passive and not get engaged.
It is. So what's next for Unicorn? What are you guys working on?
Oh my
what's
goodness.
Upcoming?
We're in the middle of rehearsal. We're opening our 46th season in 2 weeks with Who's Your Baghdaddy? Or How I Started the Iraq War, which is a very funny, satirical, musical look at how the Iraq War started, which is, I mean, it's just a series of so many stupid facts that happened and didn't happen, and, you know, lies people told each other, or people wanting to get ahead, thinking, oh, if I do this, I'll get promoted. But how exactly that all happened, and we now have this great perspective 20 years later, right, of what happened since 2000 or the late 90s. And it's great. It's fun. You learn something, but it's fun on the way. And there's really kick-ass music, rock music. And so we are having a great deal of fun putting this crazy show
So where
together.
can people find out more information on that?
They can go to our website easily, our brand new wonderful website, unicorntheater.org. Theater is always, of course, spelled T-R-E, you know, theatra, we're the European way. They can call the box office at 816-531-PLAY. But those are the great ways to do it. Go to the website, call in. And yeah, I mean, they can buy tickets, they can buy memberships now.
Absolutely.
Which are one step easier than season tickets. You can choose whatever show you want to go to, however many times you want to go to see it.
Love it. Well, thanks so much for your time and having us here. This has been really fascinating.
It's been fun to talk about it. Thank you for having me.
Hey everyone, if you liked what you saw, please hit the subscribe button. Also, you can find us on social media in the links below. Thank you.